update on the Ruby Franke case. She was in court earlier this week for a placement hearing. This is a hearing about where the children will be placed because they've been taken into DCFS custody. There are 4 minor Franke children who have all been taken into custody. None have been placed with Dad, which is super weird. And Dad was at this placement hearing and said absolutely nothing. So he is doing absolutely nothing to help his children or protect his children. And I would be very interested to see if he is charged with failure to protect. The other thing that came out in this placement hearing was crazy allegations by Ruby Franke against her 2 younger children, as if this is going to be some sort of defense for her. And here's what we know. Before the placement hearing, Jody Hildebrand's niece spoke out about her time while she was held captive by Jody. Her parents had signed over guardianship of her to Jody, and Jody tortured her. She gives an account of how Jody tortured her, but one of the things that Jody did to her was she locked her in a room and she wouldn't let her come out until she wrote down all of her sins. And when it wasn't good enough, she'd just leave her in again and say, do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And this young girl started making stuff up, trying to rack her brain to figure out what else she possibly could have done. How do I get out? Because that is what happens when you use these forms of interrogation techniques. So, Ruby alleged that her child had sexually assaulted 20 other children, and that the daughter was in on it too because they played a game together. And that is apparently, we can read between the lines, that is her justification for torturing them. First of all, it's not going to work. You can't justify torturing your children, regardless of what they did. Second of all, given the fact that we've gotten this information from the niece, which came out before the shelter in place hearing, we can guess what happened. We can guess that perhaps the 2 children engaged in some sort of doctor-type play, which I think is totally normal at some point in their lives. And this sin was confessed, but it wasn't good enough. So they were tortured until they upped their confession. And that's probably how we got to a false confession of him molesting 20 kids. There are no reports from other parents that this has happened. It is, in my opinion, probably a false confession. But the impact of that is that the little boy is now being held at a home with no other children. So he has been separated from his siblings, which is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that after going through all the trauma that he has gone through, being left by his dad, being tortured by his mom, he's now separated from his siblings. So I find that just personally very sad. I find her behavior, Ruby's and Jody's, to be absolutely deplorable. I think the niece has now brought charges or has tried again to bring charges, and I truly hope that these women are held accountable for their crimes against innocent children that they were supposed to protect. And I agree with you that many women have been convicted of failure to protect from abusive husbands. I was talking to one just yesterday. It's a pretty horrific situation. But if we're going to hold parents accountable to turn in their abusive loved ones, we need to do it uniformly. And every single person out there who might be in an abusive relationship needs to know that the risk of staying in that relationship is big. The risk to you is big. You could be charged with failure to protect. And I know that there's danger in leaving. There is danger in leaving an abusive relationship, and there is danger in staying in an abusive relationship. So I just want to recommend that anyone who's in an abusive relationship reach out to domestic violence shelters, domestic violence resources, make your plan, and get you and your kids out of there.